And ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. I want to get right to today's topics because they both are important. Why you should adhere to them. But that's second in the show. The first thing I want to talk about during the show is an upcoming event sponsored by Attack, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. Now, we're going to put up on the screen some important information, and we hope that you write it down or we hope that you screenshot it. It's an event taking place on Thursday, and it's right there in front of you. Thursday, May 21 at 3:30 p.m. at 6th and Market. And I'm going to keep that on the screen for the next 3 or 4 minutes because I want to talk about that before I talk about my second topic. Remember, the first topic is now. I'm going to spend approximately 5 minutes talking about this, and then we're going to completely shift gears and talk about my political endorsements. But I must be clear, these two topics are completely separated. One has nothing to do with the other. In fact, in regard to what I'm talking about now, what's going to take place on Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m. at 6 in Market, is sponsored by Attack, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And we are a nonpartisan cultural organization. Now, we have strong feelings personally about different candidates and different political ideology, but that's not a part of Attack. So we're making it clear. And our producer, our engineer extraordinaire, Roland, is putting the information up so you can clearly see it. Now, remember, what you saw earlier was the photograph included in the flyer, but it's the information right here that you really need to pay special attention to. Let me read it while you look at it, and then I'll explain it. At the very top, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, will host its annual gathering to recognize Ona/Oni Judge. That's going to take place Thursday, May 21 of this year, taking place at the President's House Slavery Memorial, located at 6th and Market. And you can read there at the bottom, it indicates, join us as we gather to honor the day Ona Judge courageously escaped enslavement under George Washington and claimed her freedom. Together, we will uplift her legacy, reflect on the truth of our shared history, and stand firmly in truth and historical integrity. All are welcome. Join us as we tell the truth and restore our history. Here's the thing, folks. I want you to remember that date, Thursday, May 21, 2026, 3:30 p.m., 6 in Market. That's the first thing. The second thing, as it indicates at the top, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition will host its annual gathering to recognize Oni Judge. Let me back up and explain that. Um, Attack, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. We were founded nearly a quarter century ago. We were founded 24 years ago in the year 2002. It's a long story. I don't have time to talk about it now, but let me just say this. We found out in 2002 that George Washington, President of the United States of America, enslaved black men, black women, and black children. Many of us knew that he enslaved 316 of them at his Mount Vernon, Virginia plantation, but pretty much none of us knew that of that 316 at his Mount Vernon, Virginia plantation, he held nine of them and did so illegally here in Philadelphia. So once we found out about that in 2002, we protested, we demonstrated, we resisted, we did everything we could to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about slavery in Philadelphia under George Washington at America's first White House. You all might think that, hey, wasn't America's first White House in Washington, D.C.? No, it wasn't. And here's why. At the time, Washington, D.C. was primarily swampland. So they needed to pave over it and put asphalt and tar to make it a municipal environment. While they were doing that, they decided that, hey, and this was way back in 1790, and Congress passed a law. And the law basically said this: hey, we're creating the nation's capital. We're going to put it here in DC, but we need to make sure we put it like it's supposed to be. We need roadways and sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. So while we're doing that and laying the asphalt and the tar and the cement, we're going to make Philadelphia our temporary capital. They passed a law called the Federal Residence Act of 1790, which said we're getting DC together, but in the meantime, we're going to make Philadelphia the nation's capital. And they decided that they would house George Washington at 6th and Market. It was a place called the Robert Morris Mansion, the Executive Mansion. The official name is the President's House at 6th and Market, but it served as America's first White House. And George Washington was there from 1790 to 1797. The problem, though, was that he enslaved Black men, Black women, and Black children. Remember, I told you that in 1790, America's first White House was right here in Philadelphia, and that George Washington lived there with those 9. Well, one of the 9 enslaved African descendants was a woman known as Ona Judge. Now, here's the thing. You'll see, as you see on the flyer, it says Ona, then in quotation marks, Oni Judge. Well, her birth name, her parents named her Ona, O-N-A. But when George Washington and Martha Washington enslaved her, they gave her a nickname, and the nickname is Oni. Now, the only reason that we in Attack use the Oni name is because that's the name that most people know. That's the name that George Washington used for her. That's the name that Martha Washington used for her. So in order to make sure people are not confused, we use her official birth name, Ona, and we also use the nickname Oni. Well, here's the big story about Ona/Oni. She was brought to Philadelphia as an enslaved Black girl when she was a mere 16 years old. That was in 1790. And she had enough of that slavery nonsense. So 6 years later, after going through the hell of slavery here in Philadelphia, she decided to escape. And she was approximately 22 or 23. Historians are not sure, but they know she was about 22, 23 years old when she escaped from George Washington's White House, escaped to freedom, was never captured, and it gets even better. She outlived George and Martha Washington by 50 years. They died and went to hell, and yeah, they did. They died and went to hell because they were enslavers. And after they died and went to hell, Ona/Oni Judge lived for 50 more years after they passed away, and she lived as a free woman. If you want to know more about Ona/Oni Judge, we need you to show up on Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m. at 6th and Market. 6th and Market is where America's first White House stood. 6th and Market is where George Washington enslaved those 9 men, women, and children, including one of those 9, Ona Judge. In fact, of those 9, there were actually 4 who were children. Think about that. Slavery is bad enough for a grown man. Slavery is bad enough for a grown woman. But of those 9, 5 were merely children when they were brought here. There was Ona Judge. We talked about her. She was 16 years old at the time. There was Christopher Shields, who was also 16 years old at the time. In addition, there was Paris, who also as well was 16. So you have Ona, Christopher Shields, and Paris, all 16. And then you had one younger, Richmond. Richmond was a mere 14 years old. Can you imagine your son or daughter, ages 14 to 16, being enslaved? Your grandson or granddaughter, your niece or nephew. And not only were they were enslaved right here in Philadelphia at America's first White House. Ona Judge, despite being only 16 when she was brought here, Ona Judge, despite being as young as 22 or 23 years old in 1796, she escaped. At the time in the 1790s here in Philadelphia, this city had the largest free black population in America. So if you wanted to be where there were a lot of black people who were free at that time, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but more than anywhere else, because slavery was throughout the entire country until 1865. Well, they had a free black population here in Philadelphia. By the way, Harriet Tubman spent time here in Philadelphia. They had this free black population. On the judge was able to connect with them, and along with Ona and the free black population, they had a plan to get her out of the White House, to get her to the Delaware River, to get her on a boat to New York, and to get her to New Hampshire, where she outlived George and Martha Washington by 50 years, despite the fact that George Washington, with all his power, tried to track her down, relentlessly tried to track her down, but he lost and she won. One of the great things about that site at 6th and Market, where the president's house stands, I want to be clear. We were able to attack. We fought from year 2002 until 2010 for 8 solid years of protesting and demonstrating and resisting. And on December 15 of 2010, there was a grand opening of the first, I repeat, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States of America. And that slavery memorial at 6th and Market, it is fascinating. It includes a precise and accurate replica of the entrance where George Washington went from 1790 to 1796. There's this large, majestic mansion type entrance that you walk in. And then to your left, there's this large window. And then to your right, there are two large windows, the very same structure that George Washington had in 1790. It gets better. As you walk in on the left side, there were 34, and I'll explain what I mean. 34 interpretive panels, information and photographs and images all along the site. 34 interpretive panels that explained everything about the site. In addition, there are 5 TV monitors where reenactors play the role of the 9 enslaved. In addition to that, there's this giant glass structure the size of, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 standard bedrooms. And that gigantic glass structure is called the vitrine. And that vitrine allows you to look down into the ground and see 1790. You can see the foundation walls of the kitchen where most of the 9 enslaved Africans spent much of their time, where George Washington spent a lot of his time. You can look down and see it. You want more? I got more. There's also something called the slave quarters, where at least 4 and maybe 5 of the enslaved men were housed. And this is separate from the president's house. This is nothing more than like an outdoor barn, but 10% the size of a barn. It was like a large closet outdoors. Can you imagine living through that for 7 years from 1790 to 1797? The slave quarters there. And by the way, the location of the slave quarters today, since 2010, at that slave memorial, it's interesting because before the memorial was there, the Liberty Bell Center was moved to 6th and Market. And the Liberty Bell Center is behind, if you're coming from Market Street, it's behind the slavery memorial. Here's the interesting thing. The exact location of the Liberty Bell Center is about 10, 15 feet away from the slave quarters. Why is that important? Here's why that's important. As you enter the heaven of liberty, which is the Liberty Bell Center, you literally have to cross the hell of slavery, meaning the slave quarters, to get in there. If that's not the height of historical hypocrisy, nothing is. In addition to that entrance to the site, in addition to the 34 panels, in addition to the TV monitors, in addition to the vitrine, in addition to the slave quarters, there's this large granite wall. And this large granite wall includes the names of each of those 9. I don't have enough time today to talk about it, but I do have time to repeat the following. We need you to show up Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m. at 6th and Market, which is where America's first White House stood, which is where the first and only of its kind, a slavery memorial on federal property in the history of the United States exists. Roland showed us again the information I'm relaying to you Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m., 6 in Market. Here's the thing before I move to my second topic. If you want more information about this gathering, if you want more information about how you can participate, we need you to email us or call us or go to our website. Email us or call us or go to our website. Here's the email address: atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com. Once again, atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com. That's the email address. And Roland put up on the screen our website, which is simply avengingtheancestors.com. How can you forget that? Avengingtheancestors.com. And finally, in addition to the email address, in addition to the website, let me give you the phone number, which is 215-552-8751. 215-552-8751. But please join us Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m., 6th and Market. I promise you that I had two topics today, and I do have two topics today. We just discussed the first one, that May 21 event. Now, let me talk to you about the upcoming May primary taking place on Malcolm X Day, May 19 of 2026. I used to write and might start again writing for the Philadelphia Tribune. And I started there about maybe, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago. And I would talk about issues affecting the Black community in and around Philadelphia. Everything was great until it wasn't. At a certain point, I was told that I could not do any of my endorsements in the Tribune. And in all fairness to the Tribune, they didn't just focus on me. They said that, hey, none of the reporters, none of the journalists, none of the columnists in the Tribune can do any endorsements. The Philadelphia Tribune editorial board, they do their official endorsements. And even though I didn't like it, even though I didn't agree with it, I respect somebody's house. So if I'm in your house and you have certain rules, either I have to adhere to the rules or I have to leave. I can disagree vigorously with you, but I'm not going to debate with you. It's your house. In the Tribune, it was the Tribune's house. I was just a visitor there. I was just, I guess, a renter there. And when the landlord said there's certain rules that you have to abide by, and I'm like, nah, I'm not feeling that. I'm in a position where I have information that I can share with the Black community. And based on that position and based on the information, I want to share it with our community, because most folks don't have the time to research candidates. I do. So I thought it was a service to the Black community for the Tribune to allow me to continue to do endorsements, but they decided they didn't want me to do that. I also did the same kind of thing at WRD, where I still do my radio courtroom show. And just like I love the Philadelphia Tribune, and just like I still subscribe to the Philadelphia Tribune, even though I separated myself from it, at least from the time being, I feel the same way about WRD. That's WRD 96.1 FM, WRD 900 AM. The only Black owned and operated radio station in Pennsylvania, and one of the few across the country. And WRD has a policy where on the radio, we can't endorse candidates. And I respect that. I respect that, especially because outlets like Black radio stations are being targeted by the Trump administration. So if there's a Black owned and operated station and they got hosts who are saying things against the Trump administration, against MAGA, against the Republican Party, especially in connection with political endorsements, I can see where the Trump administration, which is so vindictive and so malicious and so wicked, would come after radio stations that are Black owned and operated, TV stations that are Black owned and operated. So I can understand why the WRD has decided that its host on the radio cannot endorse any political candidates. However, Philly Cam, which I also love and respect, has a different policy. They make it clear that anything that hosts like me say does not necessarily reflect the official position of Philly Cam. So Philly Cam can speak for itself. Michael Cord can speak for himself. And that's what Michael Cord is doing right now. So I'm about to give you my endorsements, and these are from me personally, not from the ownership and management of Philly Cam, certainly not from the Philadelphia Tribune, certainly not from WRD, certainly not from Temple University where I do my thing. This is just me. This is not even attack talking. This is me, yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. And in about 3 or 4 minutes, I'll let our producer know for sure. I'm going to show you this. This is what's known as the Angry Black Man News. And I decided to create my own publication called the Angry Black Man News because I'm no longer permitted to endorse in the Philadelphia Tribune or on my WRD show. And I respect both of those media outlets. They have the right to make that decision. However, this broadcast, Philly Cam, allows me to do it and allows me to talk about the Angry Black Man News. So in the Angry Black Man News, I'm going to give you my endorsements for the upcoming May 19, 2026 primary election. Now, when I was writing for the Tribune, I wrote something I thought was really fascinating in terms of how enlightening it is. Because what I wrote is, and I'm going to read verbatim, word for word to you, what I used to write in the Tribune before I do each endorsement. And here's what I would write. Why me, you might ask. Who do I think I am, you might ask. Why should you accept my endorsements, you might ask. Here's why. To whom much is given, much is required. I have been a trial attorney for more than 30 years, an adjunct college professor of Black history for over 15 years, a cultural/political activist since my college days, a radio/TV host for more than 15 years, a newspaper columnist for about 15 years, and an African descendant throughout my entire lifetime. Furthermore, and this is important, furthermore, in the words of the great Congressperson Shirley Chisholm, I am unbought and unbossed because I neither request nor accept money, jobs, grants, or any personal benefits whatsoever from any candidate or elected official. Let me elaborate on that. Forget about, for the time being, my background and what I do as a lawyer and what I do as a radio show host and what I do as a TV show host and what I do as a college adjunct professor. Put that to the side right now. But the last thing I mention is that, in the words of the great Congressperson Shirley Chisholm, I am unbought and unbossed. I'm unbought. I don't take any money. I don't take any jobs. I don't take any grants or anything. Not only do I not take them, I don't request them. I don't want anything that benefits me coming from a candidate. I don't want anything that benefits me coming from an elected official. You ask yourself, when you see other people doing endorsements, when you see media outlets doing endorsements, ask yourself, what's in it for them? What are they getting? And I venture to say that every single one of them gets something from that candidate. Every single one of them gets something from that official. I don't want anything from them. I don't ask them for anything, and I wouldn't accept anything. That's a fact. So now that you know that, you're like, wow, if he's not benefiting personally, and he got all this experience doing research because he's a lawyer and a newspaper columnist and a radio show host and a college adjunct professor and an activist all his adult life and a black man, Wow, he got the credentials and he doesn't have a hidden agenda. That's why, that's why you should accept my endorsements. And I go on to write the following. In other words, I have no selfish interest and no ulterior motives. I don't need anything from a candidate. I don't want anything from a candidate. I don't need anything from an elected official. I don't want anything. I'm doing well in my life. I can do my own thing. So you can't entice me to endorse me because you got some money for me. You got a job for my cousin, or you got whatever hookup. I don't want any of that. I don't need any of that. I do what I do because it's the right thing. Now, also going to say, um, people might ask, why, in addition to what we already talked about, why I even do these endorsements. I do them before every primary election. I do them before every general election. You might say, why? And here's what I wrote. Why? Well, there are two reasons. The first is many black voters always ask me to do so. So there are black people out there saying, Mike, I don't have time to research and figure out this and figure out that. So can you help me? So that's the first thing. Many, and I mean literally thousands, literally. On local elections, it's several hundred or more. But in statewide and federal election, it's literally thousands. That's why I wrote first. The first is many black voters always ask me to do so. And then I write the following. The second is, unlike the average voter, I have the time and the resources to thoroughly research the candidates. Consequently, I'm able to distinguish the good candidates from the bad ones, as well as, and this is very important, the relatively not so bad candidates from the objectively bad ones. That last sentence I just stated is so important, I got to read it again. I am able to distinguish the good candidates from the bad candidates, as well as, and this is very important, the relatively not so bad candidates from the objectively bad ones. Let me expand upon that. And I can expand upon that by saying what a wise man hundreds of years ago said. He said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. For example, I got this fancy, very expensive Mont Blanc pen in my pocket that I use when I go to court. Then I got this really cheap one that I probably got at some fair or some hotel or someplace. Well, let's say I lost this really expensive Mont Blanc pen. Does that mean I'm never going to write with this cheap Bic pen? Of course, I'm going to write with it because it allows me to do what I'm doing. I love to take notes with this fancy pen and write stuff down. It feels good, it looks good. This is the perfect. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't use the good. Don't let the enemy, don't let the perfect, and write this down, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. What do I mean by that? Let me break it down. I did not want to endorse Joe Biden in the presidential election against Donald Trump. And then when Joe Biden had to pull out and Madam Vice President Kamala Harris replaced him, I didn't want to vote I didn't want to vote for her. But just as I would have voted for Joe Biden, I definitely voted for Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. I know, let me start by saying I'm a Pan African socialist revolutionary. I'm a Pan African socialist revolutionary. In other words, I believe that of the 55 countries in Africa. And by the way, Africa is a continent, not a country. And this continent of Africa has about 55 countries in it. I believe that all 55 to join together to create the United States of Africa, one government. And that government, so that's where the Pan-African comes in. And that government should be socialist, which means not capitalist. And this change, this creation of this United States of Africa should come about by any means necessary. In other words, I hope it could be done through reform and voting, and everybody's happy at the end, but it might have to come through bloodshed. Now, don't get alarmed when I talk about bloodshed and taking up arms to create the United States of Africa as a Pan-African socialist government, because damn it, that's what the 13 colonies did here in the United States. They first tried to negotiate with Great Britain because they felt that it was wrong to have taxation without representation. They had, the 13 colonies had to pay money to Great Britain, to the British Parliament. Despite the fact that the 13 colonies were paying money, they had no representation in British Parliament. So they were outraged that they had to pay taxes, but got no political representation. So they tried to negotiate with King George. That didn't work. So they took up arms. And we consider the so-called founding fathers great patriots. They took up arms because his brother Malcolm said, you got to demand justice by any means necessary. If talking and nonviolence will get it done, I'm all for it. But if taking up arms to resist brutal oppression is necessary, then do it. And Europe, and for the most part, a lot of Asia today, just take advantage and exploit African countries. So I believe politically, this continent of Africa that consists of 55 countries should come together under a Pan-African socialist economy. So the Pan-African means all coming together. What does socialism mean? It's really funny because the people who say they're against socialism and against communism have no damn idea what those things mean. And by the way, after I lay this foundation, I'll tell you exactly what who my endorsed candidates are. If you ask anybody, hey, how many support socialism? How many support communism? How many support capitalism? I can guarantee that 90% of the ones who say they oppose socialism or communism have no idea what those mean. And sadly, the people who seem to be most vocal in their opposition to socialism are poor people. I love hip hop, but the one thing I hate about hip hop is its blind allegiance to capitalism. At least in the early days of hip hop, and for the most part today, those who really love that, it's not just a musical art form, it's a subculture. And those who love that musical art form and that subculture, they see all these rappers with all this bling bling, these Rolex watches and these high-priced houses and high-priced clothing and cars and all that. And they want that. And their goal is to get out of North Philly and get out of Chicago and get out of Compton and leave that behind, to move to, I don't know, Beverly Hills, because they have this warped concept that success is being rich yourself. God damn it, success is not being rich yourself. Success is making sure that everybody benefits. There must be food, clothing, shelter, education, health care for everybody. That's the difference between socialism and capitalism. Write this down so you know what socialism is. Socialism is an economic and political ideology that puts people over profits. Let me repeat that. Socialism is a political and economic ideology that puts people over profits. Socialists recognize that money is a nice thing to have. I want to be able to buy a fancy pen. I want to be able to get nice suits, but I want everybody to be able to have fancy pens, if that's what they want. I want everybody to have nice suits if that's what they want. Socialism is people over profits. On the exact opposite spectrum is capitalism. Capitalism is profits over people. And I'm talking to black folks right now, so move to the front of the class. All of you who oppose socialism and are black, you don't know your history. Because when you talk about capitalism, which is the exact opposite of socialism, capitalism means profit over people. Capitalism means maximizing profits. So if you're a capitalist and your business earned $1 million last year, you got to earn 2 million next year, or certainly not the same amount, because you didn't maximize profit. You always have to squeeze more and more out of the worker. And you got to make sure that the worker has no protection, no workers' compensation, no time off for pregnancy, no child labor protection. If it was up to the capitalists, we'd be like it was in America during what they call the golden era, where rich folks, the Rockefellers, controlled everything. And that was called the golden era for them, or the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age simply said, we're multimillionaires, you're workers, you get nothing. That's capitalism. In fact, for the black people watching me now, understand this. Slavery was the highest form of capitalism. If you want a perfect form of capitalism, go back to slavery. Because when I explain to you that capitalism is exploiting as much as you can from the worker and giving as little as possible to the worker, that's slavery. You make that person work 24/7, 365, and you give that person no money. That's perfect capitalism. Black man, black woman, black boy, black girl, black other. Why the hell would you support a system like that? Black people should be at the forefront of the call for socialism, because that clearly is about people over profits. That's reparations. That's an increase in minimum wage. That's in decent housing. That's in good education. The Black Panther Party here in the United States had it perfectly. They understood that we need revolution to bring about a change for black people. But here's the thing that they did was so ingenious, and many people don't realize it. They see images of Black Panthers carrying guns and wearing the berets and the leather jacket and looking all fly, and that's all good. Well, except for the leather jacket, because you shouldn't be killing animals just to look fly. You can get fake leather and look just as fly. I do it all the time. This belt is fake leather. My shoes are fake leather. But I digress. Let me get back to the point. But the Black Panther Party, everybody knows about them because of the guns and the berets and the jacket and the revolutionary rhetoric. All great. But here's the thing the Black Panther Party did. You all know about that school breakfast program they had for kids. Well, when the parents brought the kids in for the free breakfast and the free health care and all that, those parents and some of the children had to listen to speeches and read information about socialism, because the Black Panther Party realized that many black people were confused and thought that capitalism is a good thing. We were brainwashed by capitalism, thinking that get the best job and get the most money and then you'll be successful. No. The whole notion of individualism is a European concept. The notion of communal thinking is from Africa. It was always about the village, not about the individual. And Europe and Europeans have brainwashed black people so much that even the younger people who are into rap, they want the fancy watches and the fancy cars and the fancy houses, and they want to leave the hood in order to get those things and leave their people behind. When we talk about socialism, we're talking about pro-blackness. When we talk about socialism, we're talking about progressivism. Here's my endorsement list, and we're going to put it up on the screen so you can see who I'm endorsing. And I quickly want to go through my reasons for endorsing the people I'm endorsing. And again, this is me, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. This is me and my personal endorsements. It's not Philly Cam, it's not the Tribune, it's not WRD, it's not Temple University, it's not even Attack. It's simply me. And here's what I have on my May 19, 2026 primary election endorsements. At the very top, you see I put together my own news publication because I can't do what I'm doing now in the Tribune. I can't do what I'm doing now at WRD, and I respect and love them both. So if you can't get what you want from without, you create what you want from within. That's exactly what I did by creating the Angry Black Man News. And at the top, you see under that banner, the Angry Black Man News. And by the way, those who don't know, I call it Angry Black Man News in honor of the great James Baldwin. And let me paraphrase what this cultural genius said. Here's what James Baldwin said: to be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. Here's what he meant by that: you can't be black in America and know about slavery and not be enraged. You can't be black in America and know about sharecropping and not be enraged. You can't be black in America and know about convict leasing and gerrymandering and redlining and mass incarceration and Jim Crow and voter disenfranchisement. You can't be black in America and know about all those things and not be enraged and not be angry. But James Baldwin taught us that the anger, the rage, it must be productive. It must be constructive. It must be strategic. And that's why I tell people I'm so glad I was born too late to be a young adult and be in the revolutionary movements of the 60s and 70s, because I know I would have done something stupid. I would have been angry. I'd have picked up a gun and done something stupid and either be in the cemetery or in the prison. But because I came around after that, I was able to find out about what our great thinkers advised us to do. And what James Baldwin said is be angry, but be productive. Be angry, but be constructive. Be angry, but be strategic. And here we have here, and I just love our producer, our engineer, because Roland makes it easy for you to see what we're talking about. Forget about the banner and the headlines. Let's go right to the issue. And that's exactly what he did. So what I have here is for the United States Congress, 3rd District, Chris Rabb. For me, it's a no-brainer. Why? Because Chris Rabb is not only a progressive, Chris Rabb is also a democratic socialist. What that means is that he is more concerned about people than he is about profits. Don't get it twisted. He's concerned as an elected official about profit because he wants everybody to do well financially. But as the African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with your people. And we want to go far. And that's why I'm endorsing Chris Rabb. There's so many more reasons, but we don't have a whole bunch of time. So let me do this. And I'm not going to use the profanity that I used on my social media posts, because on my social media posts, I had to kind of take some people to task because there were some people who were making up stuff about Chris Rabb, because they know, even though he's not part of the establishment Democratic Party, the establishment Democratic Party is so conservative and so safe and so scared that they act like Republicans sometimes. But don't get it twisted. You gotta vote for Democrats over Republicans. I don't care for the most part, with one exception, no matter how bad the Democrat is, he, she, or they are not as bad as the Republicans. Why? Because Republicans are not just Republicans. They are MAGA. And MAGA is not just Republicans. MAGA is fascism. I despise Ronald Reagan, but he's better than Donald Trump. I despise Richard Nixon, but he's better than Donald Trump. I despise Bush 1 and Bush 2, but they're better. When I say they're better, they, as racist as they are or were, they have certain guardrails. It's almost like a road, and you're traveling down the road. Yeah, the Reagans and the Nixons and the Bushes, they're going to swerve in between the lanes and across the lanes and do some bad stuff to black people, but they'll stay on the highway because there's guardrails saying you can't go. Well, this fascist, Donald Trump, has no guardrails. There's things, bad things that Reagan and that Nixon and that Bush wanted to do to black people, but they realized as elected officials, they can't go that far. There's certain things you just don't do. Trump has no guardrails. He'll do whatever he wants to do. And I say that to say, before I go back to Chris Rabb and then quickly go through my list, I would have voted for Joe Biden, but he pulled out, and then Madam Vice President Kamala Harris took his place. And I encourage people to vote. And here's why I encourage people to vote. And I hope folks follow me quickly on this, because this is critically important. Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is not Angela Davis, a revolutionary, is not Assata Shakur before Assata became an ancestor. Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is an establishment, kind of sort of conservative Democrat. And that's not what people need for change. But damn it, she's a million times better than a fascist. And I don't care what these ideological purists say. There are some people who say, well, we got to have revolution tomorrow, so we can't vote for Madam Vice President Kamala Harris because she's not revolutionary enough. She's not Angela Davis. She's not Assata Shakur. I get that. But if Assata was around and ran for office, she would get trounced by anybody, especially Republican. If Angela Davis ran for office, she would get trounced. So we got to figure, how do we beat the orange fascist? We don't beat him by being ideologically pure. We beat him by using what we have to get what we want. God damn it. I really want people to listen to me now. Kamala Harris was the best chance of beating Donald Trump. Nobody else could have beat him. And she fought a good fight. But there were so many misogynistic, self-hating black men who refused to vote for her. And remember what I said before. I'm a Pan-African socialist revolutionary, but I voted for Madam Vice President Kamala Harris because I knew she was the only thing that protected us from Donald Trump. Yeah, she's a capitalist. I get it. Yeah, she's a Zionist. I get it. Yeah, she's involved in corporate politics. I get it. But either Madam Vice President Kamala Harris was going to be president or Donald Trump was going to be president. That's a no-brainer. And if only one of them is going to be president, it's not that you love Madam Vice President Kamala Harris and that's why you voted for her. It's that you hated the fascism of Donald Trump. Nobody who's honest would say that Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is against DEI because she supports DEI. Nobody can say that Madam Vice President is against critical race theory because she supports critical race theory. Nobody can say that Madam Vice President Kamala Harris is against affirmative action or women's rights or gay rights or is Islamophobic. Nobody can say that, but you can say all that and more against Donald Trump. So if we know that no third-party candidate is going to win, and we know that third-party candidates like that damn Cornel West, who I used to love, when he decided to run, he pulled votes from the Democrats. You know how I know? Because Donald Trump's lawyers and Republican Party lawyers gave free legal assistance to Dr. Cornel West to get him on various state ballots. Why would Trump want Dr. Cornel West on a ballot? The answer is obvious. So he could take away votes, so Dr. Cornel West can take away votes. Remember what Ralph Nader did to Al Gore. The reason that George Bush won in Florida is because Ralph Nader, who used to be a progressive, decided to run and he pulled votes away from Al Gore. Was Al Gore Malcolm X? Of course he wasn't Malcolm X, but he was better than Bush, and only one of them. In fact, the greatest living revolutionary today is Angela Davis. And Angela Davis voted for Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. Angela Davis is a communist. Why would she vote for a capitalist? Because she knew the damage of a fascist. So when I say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, that's what I'm saying. Let's get in the final 5-6 minutes to my endorsed candidates. Top of the list is Chris Rabb. He's a progressive and he's also a democratic socialist. And those lying liars who say that he voted to protect child sex traffickers are just that, lying liars or dumbasses or both. I'm not going to read my social media posts because it includes some profanity, but just go to Michael Cord, Michael, last name Cord, Card. Go to my Facebook page and go to my Instagram page. If you don't have either of those, I'll screenshot the post and email it to you. Contact me at michaelcordx@gmail.com. michaelcordx@gmail.com. But let me go through my list. So first on the list is 3rd District, Chris Rabb. Also, he's a pro-Palestinian. But instead of calling him a pro-Palestinian, he's pro-human rights. He doesn't like brown people or any people, especially babies, getting incinerated by Zionist bombs paid for by U.S. tax dollars. And he'll call it like he sees it. He's a man of principle. Encourage, vote for Chris Rabb, 3rd District. 2nd District, vote for Brendan Boyle. Why? Because he's the Democrat. And the only entity on the state level, for the most part, and the federal level, that can beat the MAGAs are the Democrats. Damn it, remember what I said. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's why I'm endorsing 2nd District candidate for U.S. Congress, Brendan Boyle. 5th District candidate, Mary Gay Scanlon, who's really, really good. 5th District candidate, Mary Gay Scanlon. For the Pennsylvania State Senate, there's 4th District candidate, Art Haywood. Also for the Pennsylvania State Senate, there's 8th District candidate, Senator Anthony Hardy Williams. And now I'm going to quickly go through the State House. That's the State House Representatives. 181st District, Malcolm Kenyatta. 182nd District, Ben Waxman. 184th District, Elizabeth Fielder. 186th District, Jordan Harris. 188th District, Rick Krajewski. 190th District, Roni Green. 191st District, Joanna McClinton. 192nd District, Morgan Cephas. 194th District, Tariq Khan. 195th District, Sierra McNeil. 198th District, Derisha Parker. 200th District, Chris Johnson. And 201st District, Andre Carroll. I'm going to tell you how you can get this list if you want it. And thanks to our producer extraordinaire, Roland, you can see it. For governor, Josh Shapiro. And you notice that next to Josh Shapiro, I put Democrat. Why? Because you might have, and you should have, legitimate complaints about Josh Shapiro. But remember, we're trying to stop the fascism of the MAGA party, the fascism of the Republican Party, the fascism of the Trump Party. A Democratic governor is the best way, unfortunately. He's an establishment Democrat. I despise establishment Democrats, but I got to use what I have to get what I need. I need to beat fascism. So if the best way for me politically is to beat a Republican governor by getting a Democratic governor, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So that's why I'm endorsing Josh Shapiro for governor. And then there are two ballot questions. By the way, you might say, hey, Mike, there's some other progressives and Democratic socialists running across the state. But I'm focusing on Philadelphia because the people who listen to me and hear me and see me know me in Philly. There's some great candidates running in other counties outside of Philadelphia. One of my favorite candidates is Summer Lee, but that's Pittsburgh, that's Allegheny County. I'm focusing on Philadelphia area voters. And speaking of Philadelphia, two ballot questions. One, should a Philadelphia Retirement Savings Board be created? I don't have time to explain why the answer is yes, but the answer is yes. Vote yes on ballot question number one. Ballot question number two, should a youth slash child welfare juvenile justice ombudsperson office be created? In other words, should there be some entity that speaks and fights on behalf of juveniles in the child welfare system, in the juvenile justice system? Clearly, the answer is yes. So vote yes on both questions. If you want a copy of my endorsement list, if you want a copy of my reasons as to why you should follow my endorsement list, please email me at michaelcordx@gmail.com. That's MICHAELCOARD, the letter X. Over my right shoulder, you see Malcolm X. So I'm Michael Cord X, MICHAELCOARD, the letter X, at gmail.com. And I'll send you a copy of the Angry Black Man news publication and also the reasons why you should accept what I'm saying. And our final 1 minute and a half, remember two things I said today. One, make sure you attend the ATTAC event, ATAC event, in honor of Ona/Oni Judge, taking place on Thursday, May 21, 3:30 p.m. at 6 in Market. For more information about that, email us at atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com. That's atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com, or call us 215-552-8751. 215-552-8751. Right there. Thanks again to Roland. And finally, once again, you got to get a copy of the Angry Black Man News so you can see why I endorse and who I endorse and how, because I'm a proud progressive, because I'm a proud democratic socialist, because I'm a proud Pan-African democratic socialist fighting for people over profits. I'm going to end today's show like I end every show. It goes like this. Think black. I'm out.